Welcome to PlanStrongerTV. I'm your host, David Holland. On today's program, I'll be joined by Daytona Beach, Florida attorney Paul Rice to discuss divorce at older ages, what is often called graying of divorce. I'll also answer Diane's question about how to efficiently leave money to humane societies while maintaining control. Ready? Let's roll. And welcome back. So an important part of retirement is your marital relationship. And there's a growing trend of people getting divorced at older ages. It's called the graying of divorce. Well, I'm very pleased to bring in an expert on the subject, divorce attorney Paul Rice. Paul, welcome.
Great to be here, Dave. Thanks.
Glad to have you with us. So your practice is in Daytona Beach, Florida?
It is. I have a divorce practice in Daytona. Yes, sir.
All right. Rice Law, and you've had the firm for, I heard, over 3 decades. Is that true?
That is true. It's been over 30 years. I've been practicing for 33.
Wow. Excellent. Fantastic. Well, we need your expertise, Paul, because there is a trend going on in our society, in the American culture, where people are getting divorced more often, at a higher percentage, at older ages. And so for our viewers, if they're either facing this possibility or maybe they've been divorced or may get divorced again, there's also a trend in multiple marriages. We need your insights into what this is all about and what's going on.
Okay. I'm prepared to answer the questions.
All right.
I specialize in gray divorce.
Okay, well then let's dig in. So the first question is, and I kind of set it up, but I'd like you to answer a little more fully for the audience, is what is this phenomenon, gray divorce?
When we refer to gray divorce, we're talking about generally people over 50, which would be baby boomers.
Okay.
Okay. And so what we've seen is, despite, contrary to what you said earlier, despite the overall divorce rate going down in the United States, the divorce rate for people over 50 is going up.
Okay, so they make up a higher percentage of all divorces.
Yeah, so for example, like right now, at least based on 2010 statistics, 1 in 4 divorces involved people over 50, whereas in 1990, it was half that.
Okay.
So there's been a doubling of the gray divorce rate.
That's significant. What are some of the reasons you think for that?
A number of reasons. First of all, there's a societal acceptance of divorce.
Okay.
The other is you're finding that the wife or the woman, the divorce, is now economically empowered. Oftentimes, it's a two income families.
Okay.
The other is a lot of times people wait until the children are out of the home before they break up the family, so to speak. So they're deferring the divorce until they're in their 50s. The other might be that they are waiting till they're financially comfortable. Okay. That is, they've paid all their bills, they pay the house down, everything, and they're financially able to get the divorce in their 50s. Another reason we see it is that oftentimes people who are married in their 50s, it's their second, third, or fourth divorce.
So that contributes to the statistic as well.
Statistically, second, third, or fourth divorces last. The likelihood of success is a lot less than a first divorce.
Okay.
The other thing is that generally now, baby boomers and then people who were raised in the 60s, happiness is now me being happy. Happiness is no longer being married.
Ah,
okay.
So more about how you feel as opposed to what it looks like.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And the other thing I see, I don't see it written about that much, but my experience is when you have older people who are in second marriages and they have children from a previous relationship, adult children cause divorces in older parties. Because they're starting to see their parents get older, closer to death, and what are they worrying about? Their inheritance.
Money's part of it. Yeah.
Their inheritance.
And they become protective. Yeah.
Because they recognize if their mom or dad passes, all the money may go to this evil stepmother or stepfather, whereas if they can get their parent to divorce, at least they're in there for a good half of it or so.
You know, it's sad to think it would be that, I don't know, sinister or planning, but it does happen.
All the time.
Yeah. Well, so when you look at the granting of divorce and these changes, I imagine that there are some differences also as it relates to how, and you spoke about this a little bit, about how men and women approach that possibility of divorce in today's, you know, modern era.
Okay, so statistically, 2/3 of all divorces in the gray area, that is, of people over 50, are initiated by women.
Wow.
You know, they're just, you know, back in the day, wives were, again, economic captives, so they really weren't in a position to do it. And again, societally, they didn't want to be a divorcee, those types of things. And that's all changed. And so,
Yeah, I think it might be a little simpler than that. It might be that she's decided that I married him for dinner, not for lunch. I'm not going to be retired to this guy, and with life expectancy and longevity, I don't know if I can do lunch with this guy for the next 30 years.
well, you know, you just brought up an important point, and I didn't mention that earlier, and that is people are living longer.
Yeah.
Okay? So a lot of times they didn't get divorced because, you know why?
I could put
the
up with it
husband
for
died.
5 years.
No, the husband
Yeah.
died.
5 years I can handle. 30, not so much.
Back in the day, you know, the husband worked his whole career, retired, and a year later he died at the age of 60 or 65. Well, now people are living till they're 90, and so it's a whole second half of life almost. And so another reason, statistically, I forget what the statistics are, is that, you know, there's now more actually divorced women out there than there are widows. Used to be by and large, it was, you know, if a woman was not married later in life, she was a widow, not a divorcee. But, you know, there's been a paradigm shift, and now it's divorced versus
That's
widow.
a big shift. Well, and there's also a couple other things you've got. You mentioned, you know, getting the kids out of the house. You have the empty nesters.
Sometimes they sit across the table, and they're going, I don't even like this person. You know, so what's happened is
Now
they've
the kids
retired.
aren't there.
The kids aren't there, and let's say they've retired. So when either husband or both parties were working, they'd only see each other at dinner time, right? You know, for an hour or so at dinner, and then he'd go to the den, she'd go to TV, whatever. And so now all of a sudden the dynamics have changed. All of a sudden he's home every day. And they're sitting across the table, and they either don't know each other, or they don't like each other.
And maybe sometimes their goals or their plans for retirement are not the same, and maybe one wants to travel extensively, one wants to sit in the lazy boy and watch news all day.
I've had that case 20 times.
Yeah, at least.
At least, yeah, at least.
Are the resources, you know, the financial security for retirees, and especially for women you mentioned, that's a game changer as well. Then just to share the ability to look at financial resources as maybe, okay, we've accumulated enough to where we could both live on half.
Right, sure. So that's the economic empowerment. You know, yes, I think, you know, oftentimes they would. So you know, so when a let's say a wife over 50 comes to me about a divorce, she's just investigating that. Says, you know, I'm really not happy. Let me know how this might look if I pursue a divorce. And so what I do, and I try to do this, and I say, well, let's do a reality check. So, and because I've been doing it so long, and because I know the law and I know how the judges rule, I can pretty much tell them how it's going to end up.
What's going to look like.
And then let's do how is this going to be in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? And so, you know, depending on maybe what I tell them, that how I perceive the outcome to be, they make a decision to get divorced because they're miserably unhappy. And if they realize they can make it, they'd rather sleep in a one bedroom apartment happy than live in that other house miserable.
Well, you know, there's a part of this sometimes that people are very involved with the emotional aspect of the divorce, but what you're describing, Paul, is definitely I think a trend that is changing, where that's a very strategic, thoughtful process you just described, where a woman in your example comes to you and says, hey, here's what I'm thinking about. What's this play out and look like? That doesn't sound like an emotional, you know.
We know a lot of times the crying's already done.
Okay.
You know, when they get to me. And as I tell all my prospective clients, you know, as a divorce attorney, I'm your last resort, not your first resort. So as a divorce attorney, we're not there to encourage people to get divorced. quite to the contrary. I'm a married man. I believe in the institution of marriage. And so I encourage people, even if their children are adults, adult children can be greatly affected by their parents getting divorced, no matter what age those children are. So, so I don't take it lightly, and I don't encourage people to get divorced. But you know, when you get someone and they're like completely miserable, and they've already gone through all the counseling. So I mean, you know, and I can recommend some good counselors if a client needs it. But generally, they've gone through all that. They've gone through all those stages, and now they're in acceptance, and they go, hey, you know, can I do this, Mr. Rice? You know,
and then you can say, well, here's the different scenarios, and here's how it plays out. And so when you give people that information, how do they respond?
Sometimes they're really happy. I met with a lady yesterday, and she didn't, you know, she wanted to get divorced, but all the assets were in the husband's name. And they had like $5 million. All right, but she didn't have access to any of it. I said, do you have a credit card? And she said, yeah. I said, well, just put the $5,000 on the credit card. What am I gonna do about that? I said, once I get you $2.5 million, you'll pay it. Right. You know what I mean? So
you were talking about the retainer.
Yeah, the retainer. Yeah, the $5,000 retainer. The $5,000 is going to be nothing, you know.
But she felt trapped because she didn't have access to the money.
Trapped. Yes, exactly. See it all the time, unfortunately.
And it's no way to live.
No.
Whether you're divorcing or staying married, that's no way to live.
No.
I encourage women and men, but especially women, to be involved with their finances.
And in fairness, the times they are changing. I've had numerous divorces of late, let's say over the past couple of years, where the female is the primary breadwinner.
And has the assets.
And ends up paying alimony in the divorce case. So you know, we talk in terms of like, everyone talks, they assume as if the woman is going to receive alimony. It's not that way anymore. That's traditionally, but you know, times are changing. There's more than 50% of the students in law school are females now, and so you know.
Well, you mentioned alimony. Is that different in a gray divorce, a divorce over 50, or if somebody's already retired, is alimony different than versus somebody younger?
Well, yeah. So what happens is, doing a divorce case now, the parties have, let's say, a $20 million marital estate, but they're both retired. So what's going to happen there, for example, is, of course, that's not exactly a typical situation.
Well, if it's $2 million,
they're each going to, yeah, that's $2 million. Each are going to get $1 million. And neither is going to get alimony. I mean, alimony is based upon the length of the marriage, but also is there a disparity in income between one of the spouses and the other? So what happens is, yes, you know, if everybody's retired, so one spouse may be getting Social Security and a little teacher's pension or something, and if they're over 70 and a half, they're getting some minimum required distributions from their IRAs. And their income's maybe $5,000, and the other spouse's income's $1,700 from his or her Social Security. Alimony's gonna be maybe $1,000 a month.
Not a lot to even up there.
Yeah, exactly, because what happens is once they're already retired, their income is limited. And in fact, that's another challenge is, you know, you've got people on a fixed income, and if they're going to have two households or two roofs instead of one, it's a challenge how to afford it. You know, it's not like you can go out and make money and start and get another nest egg again because you're 67 years old.
And you see that a lot where that can be a factor when people are looking at divorces. The fixed income and the assets that they have is what they've got because they're retired and they're not working. That then creates a whole other set of challenges to create that divorce scenario.
It does, and so what we do is oftentimes I go out and get what's called a certified divorce financial analyst, which is an investment advisor that's got a special designation. And so I get that expert specialist involved mostly with my wife clients because maybe they weren't the ones who were working, maybe they weren't the ones who are managing the money. And so we try to get with the planner and see what do we need to do. We going to liquidate that asset or this asset and make sure we have liquidity and income coming in. So yeah, with people at that age, as opposed to a couple of 35-year-olds getting divorced, who can possibly rebuild their nest egg over the course of their working life.
I imagine that the home in those scenarios, especially if somebody doesn't have a lot of assets, you know, you're middle America, I would imagine the home is probably one of the biggest challenges is how they take an asset. Maybe they've worked hard all their lives to pay that off. Now they have a home that's free and clear that works if they're together, but breaking that apart.
You know, for the average, you know, let's say divorcing couple, the home is probably the largest asset in the marital estate.
Wow.
So then the question is it financially feasible for one of the spouses to keep the home, or are we going to have to sell the home, split the proceeds so that each party can live in a house half as expensive, you know? And that's another challenge, David, is can both parties maintain that same standard of living after they divorce? Often not. Oftentimes both parties are going to have to take a reduced standard of living, you know, if they're going to live separate.
Yeah, and in addition to, you mentioned another couple points. So you talk about doing the analysis of where people will be. We can't overlook taxes either.
Taxes, and there's also, you know, what happens is, especially when you're dealing with a gray divorce, that is folks that are over 50, 60, 70, and they have, you know, numerous assets they built, not even numerous. Let's say if the marital estate's $500,000, you know, you have to compare apples to apples. So sometimes some assets have a lot of hidden capital gains in them. So they both assets maybe are worth $100,000, but one, if you liquidate it, has a $30,000 tax, maybe a $15,000 tax implication. The other doesn't have any. So you got to be careful with cash assets or tax-deferred IRAs and 401ks, which is another issue, Dave, is we have to address how to divide the 401k, how to divide the IRA. Let's say we've got a teacher's pension or a policeman's pension. You know, how do we divide those? And so, fortunately, we do have the tools to do that. And so, you know, a good divorce attorney can help their client with those assets, help get them divided, and so that hopefully both parties have sufficient income and assets to live at least a decent standard of living.
And you can be strategic about that in terms of what you, if you're working for your client, you can be strategic. Say, I tell you what, we've got a $500,000 estate here. We'll take the cash. You can have the IRAs in the house. Does that sound good?
Yeah. And if the other side doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah, right.
Right. So if the other side has hired that general practitioner lawyer, not the divorce expert.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pitfall right there.
That may result in some significant differences.
Exactly.
We talked about retirees, especially with Social Security, but there's also the health insurance factor as well, right?
Okay, so the health insurance is probably the biggest issue if both parties haven't reached 65.
For Medicare.
Medicare age, right? Huge challenge. I've had parties not get divorced because they couldn't afford the health insurance. I've had a very nice lady, she had cancer. So, and the husband, he was okay with continuing to be married and sort of live estranged. So a lot of people have to choose to live married but separate so that one spouse can continue to have health insurance. You know, from a standpoint, we're about to have a big change. It looks like in the health insurance landscape in the United States.
I think we always will be, won't we?
Always, exactly. And so, it's not as easy. You know, what happens is if you have spouses and one of the spouses working and has the health insurance and the other spouse and maybe the children are covered by that policy, well, when the parties get divorced, they're no longer dependents. They no longer have any legal relationship. So the husband can't stay on the wife's insurance, okay, because he's not a dependent anymore. So then the other solution is what's called COBRA. It's a continuation of benefits under a federal law, but COBRA insurance is very expensive, oftentimes unaffordable. So health insurance is a problem.
Yeah, that's a challenge. Well, and it certainly gives meaning to the marriage vows for sicker or for, you know, for health.
Better or for worse, right?
Yeah. So all important considerations, Paul, and I think for people watching, they need to think about these things carefully before they do something, and if they're in the middle of it, to be mindful of some of these challenges in the gray divorce. I'm so glad you could be with us. Paul Rice, ladies and gentlemen, helping us understand how gray divorce works and some of the issues. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, David.
Okay, today's viewer question comes from Diane in Palm Coast, Florida. Diane has been saving up her questions and sent me a bunch all at once. Here's the first set of questions about trust. Diane writes, I have no individual beneficiaries, so I'm inclined to leave some of my money to the Humane Societies due to my strong love for animals. How can I be sure that the money will be used for the animals and not funneled through layers of unnecessary administration and related costs? Who distributes my money? Is there a cost for this service? I hope not, or that at least is not a lot. What do I do? I'm going to reorganize Diane's questions into three parts. Number one, how does she get her money where she wants it to go? Number two, who's responsible for making it happen? And number three, how can she accomplish her goals efficiently? Part one is the how. I'm inclined to leave some of my money to the humane societies, so how do I do that? The easiest way, of course, Diane, would be to make a gift to the charity during your lifetime. I'm reluctant, however, to recommend somebody give a lot of what they may need for themselves to a charity. So my focus here will be on how to get your money where you want it to go after you're finished with it. I say after you're finished with it because unless you have a lot more money than you could really ever need, I favor an approach that keeps you in control of your finances. These 4 options I'm going to share will allow you to use the money or change your mind about who gets your assets later. Option 1, name your favorite charity as a direct beneficiary of your assets. For example, you can do this with your IRAs, annuities, bank accounts, and even your investment accounts. Option 2, leave the assets to the charities by naming them in your will. Option 3, create a trust and specify the charities you want monies distributed to by your trustee. And option 4, create a trust, specify the types of charities, and give your trustee the discretion to choose which charities get the money from your trust each year. Each of these options has advantages and disadvantages. It's hard for me to say which would be best. The total amount of the assets someone has, how much they would want to leave to the charities, how quickly they want that money to go to the charities, all those things need to be considered. Part 2 of Diane's question is about who. How can I assure the money is used for the animals and not funneled through layers of unnecessary administration and the related costs, and who distributes my money? Those are who questions. If the money's going to go to the charities after your death, then it would be handled by the charity, your executor, that's your personal representative, or your trustee. If you don't want your monies going to a potentially inefficient charity, you'll need to do some homework using a service like Charity Navigator that rates charities on their efficiency. As an alternative, you can let someone else make the selection for you after you're deceased. In order for someone else to do that, you need to select someone you can count on to distribute your assets according to your will or serve as your trustee. The challenge with designating a charity to receive your monies directly without any further screening at your death is that they may have been good when you picked them, but they might lose their way later. While you won't be around to see it, unless you have a good view from where you are, you may not want to leave it to chance that the money will be misdirected. It may be better to deliver your bequest to the charities through a will or a trust. With this approach, your executor or trustee will act on your specific wishes as to when, how much, how frequently your money is given to the designated charities, and under what conditions that occurs. Here's an example that brings all this together. Let's assume somebody leaves their entire estate of $200,000 in trust to be paid out over a 10-year period to charities that provide shelter and adoption services for animals. The trustee is given the discretion to select charities that may fit this category and make distributions to them each year. The grantor of the trust, that's the person who set it up and whose money we're talking about, can set the eligibility requirements. The charity's success rates, financial stability, and administrative efficiency can all be evaluated by the trustee in picking which ones get money each year. In this example, somebody like Diane can increase the likelihood that her money is going to go to worthy charities. Part 3, costs. Is there a cost for this service? I hope not, or that it's at least not a lot. You can tell that one of Diane's biggest concerns is the cost associated with getting her money where she wants it to go. Most of us don't want to pay any more than we have to for anything, even when we're dead. Unfortunately, the old saying, you get what you pay for, could not be any more true or applicable to hiring somebody to take care of your financial affairs after you're gone. You've worked hard and saved a chunk of money. The last thing you should do is pick the cheapest option to get your money to those you care most about. And if you're going to hire someone to be your executor or trustee, you need to be realistic that there will be costs. Professional trustees like CPAs, financial planners, banks will typically charge between 2 and 3% of the assets they're responsible for handling in these capacities. Of course, you could ask a friend or family member to do it, but that won't guarantee that there won't be costs or that your money will go where you want it to go. Excellent question, Diane. Thank you very much for asking. And don't you forget, ladies and gentlemen, you can email me your questions and I'll answer them on the program. Thanks for watching.
If you would like more information about the topics and our guests featured in this series, please visit our website at PlanStrongerTV.com. Also, if you have a question you would like David to answer, please send it to questions@PlanStrongerTV.com.